Coach Tony.
Hey, folks, we're back, and we are joined on the lines this week by Kevin Cowherd, who just did a collaboration, the first in a 3-part series of Disney books, all about issues that are facing our kids in contemporary sports and in contemporary society in general. First book is called Hothead, and if you were listening during the first segment, I am literally oozing over this book. Love the book. You got to get it. It ain't just a baseball book. You need to get it for your young athletes. We are joined by Kevin on the lines, and what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to get to a couple of emails. And as I go through these, usually I'll just jump in and start shredding people for saying stupid stuff. But since we have a world-renowned author with us this week, I'm going to give him a shot at some of these thoughts. So, Kevin, I don't know if you're game. I'm going to read through some of these sportsmanship issues. And as a coach and as a dad, put your author hat to the side for a second and let me know what you think about some of these, all right?
Sounds good, Tony.
All right, well, we got an email in from Kevin in Rockville Center who writes in and says, "Hey, Coach Tony. Last summer, I was coaching a group of 13 and 14-year-olds in the Williamsport tournament. Now, for you, those of you who don't know, ESPN each year puts on TV the Little League World Series. Well, at the different age groups beyond the 12-year-olds, they call it the Williamsport tournament. Well, Kevin continues and says, we're playing a neighboring town when their cleanup hitter hits a walk-off home run. As soon as he connected with the ball, he turned to his teammates in the third base dugout while still standing in the batter's box and let out a, quote, Kevin Garnett-like scream. Then he turned, Adam's laughing at that one. Then he turned and did the same towards our dugout while doing the, and I can't say what he said. The kid was doing the, quote, big cojones dance. Now, if anybody watched the movie Major League, when Serrano was accused of having no marbles, is what the term was in the movie, the dance that Serrano did when he hit his home run, well, this kid did the same thing. Now, as he was doing it, the ball barely cleared the left field fence. I talked to the other manager after the game who told me, and I quote, hey, if you don't like it, try to get him out. Nice, coach. Lots of blame to go around for behavior like that. ESPN, parents, coaches, a general me-first society. But back when we played together, when you hit a walk-off, you put your arms up. But when you went on your way around the bases but you just went on your way around the bases before being mobbed at home plate. The primal screams came from your teammates and from the stands. And no lewd gestures. Our parents and coaches would not have tolerated it. I think the overregulation of warnings and ejections has also changed that. Baseball used to be able to be self-policed and had long been mostly immune to the me-first showboating stuff. But now that self-policing is mostly gone, it's headed the way of basketball and football. Kevin, you coach baseball. You got 13, 14-year-old kid hits a walk-off. Everything from the primal scream to the big cojones dance. What do you make of that?
Well, Tony, I'm totally old school with this, okay? I mean, I just think there's just absolutely no place for that. 13 and 14-year-old kids, you're trying to teach them the right way to play the game, the right way, the sportsmanship, everything that's antithetical to what just happened, what Kevin is describing in his email. I just don't think there's any place for it. I can't believe the coach's response is to turn around and say, well, listen, if you don't like it, try to get this guy out. I mean, look, if that was my player doing that, I sit him down. I make him miss games. I explain to him, look, this isn't the way you treat the opposition. You treat them with respect the same way you expect to be treated. And what you've done there, okay, you've won the game. You hit a walk-off homer, but you disrespected your teammate, your opponent. And that's one of the worst things you can do in sports.
Yeah, I mean, I got to tell you, I'm not, and by the way, Kevin and I just met each other. Aside from other things I have in common with Cal Ripken, I was a great baseball player. I am very good looking. I was also a major league hothead, and I was a major league showboater, and that's one of the reasons I do what I do. Anyone who's listened to the show knows part of the reason I'm doing this is like a scared straight program. I'm trying to give something back to help alleviate the burden of coaches and parents from dealing with idiots like the kid I was when I was a kid. I can still, at some level, understand maybe the kid getting emotional and letting out the yell, knowing you just won the game. I'm borderline on that. But if a kid, and I'm glad you said what you said, if one of my kids, and I now coach a very competitive, elite 14-year-old team in Team New York Baseball, one of my kids does the big cojones dance, I got to tell you, that kid is sitting, and I mean, I would not let my team go out to home plate for him. that kid is getting sat down immediately, and he is going to at least have a game off. So I'm glad you said that, because I don't think there's another way to handle something like that. If you don't, and it seems, I don't know if this coach was his dad. I don't know if this coach is just an idiot who doesn't get it. But the only thing I wish is that Kevin would have told me what town he was playing against, because I would call this guy out immediately. And Kevin, if you're listening and you can call in and even anonymously give us the name of this town, I will call out this coach, because that's bordering on disgusting. And there's just no other way to say it, man. All right, we got another good one here from our good buddy Jerry in White Plains, who writes in and says, "Hey, Coach Tony, I personally think that sportsmanship is headed down the dumper." And those are Jerry's words, and I think you can say dumper on the radio. I think sportsmanship is headed down the dumper, and we're all just sitting by watching it happen. One of the biggest problems I see is that coaches don't step in anymore and make tough decisions when they're faced with a kid who is a bad sport. When we were growing up, if you got out of line, the coach had the authority and, dare I say, the responsibility to step in and take action. You rode the bench or got booted off the team in some cases if you behaved like a jerk. And after you got your dose of reality from your coach, you would go home and get another heaping dose of reality from your parents for embarrassing them. Now it seems the coaches are afraid to discipline kids, especially the more talented ones, for fear of losing a simple game. And the parents are no longer the fear-worthy disciplinarians. They're always seemingly taking the side of the kid when a punishment is doled out and calling an attorney into the equation. So factor all this together, and what do we have, Tony? A nation of spoiled brat athletes who have an enormous sense of entitlement. If something doesn't change, and change soon, I think we're in for a dose of reality of our own when this generation takes its turn to start running this country and our businesses. What real-life experiences will they be able to draw upon? Jerry, as always, a great thought on the email, and I think you nailed it. Kevin, what do you think about that?
Well, I'll tell you something. I mean, I totally understand what Jerry is talking about, Tony, but I got to tell you that in my experience, 90% of the kids that I dealt with, and again, I coached baseball for 1,000 years, soccer, basketball, 90% of those kids were great kids. I had zero problems with them. I had zero problems with their parents. There is that element of other, maybe the other 10% where I have to totally agree with Jerry. You try as a coach to say something to them, and you might get some heat from their parents. There's a lot of factors behind that. One of the factors, I think, Tony, is that so many of these kids are playing all sorts of different sports, all right? So they might play travel baseball, AAU baseball, and so they think they're better than the rules. They can do whatever they want because all these teams want them. They want them to play. And so the coaches, the parents, sometimes buy into that mentality too. Hey, my kid is terrific. My kid is too good to criticize. You can't be criticizing my kid. So, I do agree with a lot of what Jerry said. In my opinion, though, most kids still want to play the game the right way. Most parents still understand that, hey, the coach has some authority, especially, on the field, to tell my kid the right and the wrong way to act, and they stay out of it. But, of course, there is that other element of the small minority of kids who act up and their parents back them up, and that puts a coach at a real disadvantage.
Kevin, let me ask you this. If you don't mind, how old are your kids?
Okay, my kids are older now. My oldest is 28, Jerry. I coached him until he was 15 in all three sports, and my youngest is 19. And same thing, I coached him in all three sports, too, for many, many years. So my kids are a little older now. They're not in the thick of it right now, as I'm sure your kids are, and probably Jerry's kids are, too.
Jerry's kids. All right, I'm not going to make any joke about Jerry's kids. All right. Kevin, I got in trouble for saying a word on the air a couple of months ago, so I got to really be careful about that one. But so when was the last time you coached? And this, like I said, this is more for a reference point. Yeah,
this would be about 5 or 6 years ago when I coached my youngest. I coached him again in basketball and baseball and soccer.
Okay. Now, I will tell you, this whole phenomenon is really, I don't want to say it's only happened in the past 6 years, but it's really started to become more mainstream. And I know you stay up to speed on this stuff. The whole idea of getting the attorneys involved. I mean, just, a week or two ago, we had a kid. And you know the story of that kid, Anthony. I keep forgetting his last name, down in Florida, who the pitcher who has the 2 prosthetic legs, who got cut from the varsity as a sophomore.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not up on that guy.
All right, well, I'll tell you what, it's a great story. You would really love it. Go to my blog at HeyCoachTony.com and check out this one. The kid basically just got cut from the varsity as a sophomore, which, by the way, most sophomores don't make varsity. But this whole idea of what's happened over the past, let's say, 5 to 10 years, it is becoming much more of what I'll call an epidemic, clearly, in that, the parents are just so siding with their kids where, if I went home and told my father that I badmouth a coach because of something he did, the first thing would be, a nice good old-fashioned Italian papa backhand to the chin, and then you go apologize to the coach, and then you go apologize to your teammates. We clearly are losing focus in general terms. And granted, it's not the majority, but there are certainly, I think you go to any town USA, and there are 1, 2, or 3 kids in that town that are the quintessential example of spoiled brat kid with a sense of entitlement, and that sense of entitlement comes from a mom or dad that have no clue about what sports is really about, and they really think at 9 or 10 their kid's going to take over for the shortstop position for the New York Yankees.
Oh, absolutely. Hey, Tony, I'm not trying to minimize it because I know it exists. And the problem, of course, is that these bad apples get all the publicity so often, and so you think that sports is dominated by those guys. My point is still that most of these kids, I think, want to do things the right way. But I'm not trying to minimize it. I know this stuff exists. Even though I'm not coaching now, I stay up on this, and I'm not familiar with the Florida case, but I know it's out there, and there's no question that it's a real problem, and it's a problem that coaches have to deal with. And Tony, I mean, the coach is the guy who puts in all the hours, all the effort, and he's the guy that really has to deal with this. Where the parents half the time they drop the kid off and they don't even watch the game. That happens so often these days. So, I know it's a problem. There's no question about it. And again, I'm not trying to minimize it.
No, of course not. And I tell you, we have to go to a break here in a second. I always say it this way, that as a parent, you have the luxury of worrying about one kid. When I'm the coach, I got to worry about all of them. And like I said, we're going to have to go to a break here. But before we go to break, I spent most of the day yesterday freezing my butt off in Brooklyn at a soccer tournament. But it was all worth it to watch my little girl and her team take second place in this really big tournament out at the Aviator Sports Complex off of Flatbush Avenue in Brooklyn. Great place if you've never been there. But on the way home, to celebrate, we went over to Somers 202 Tavern for this little celebration dinner. And as usual, my good buddy Joe Maz was the most gracious of hosts. And he did not disappoint with the menu. There's always something good going on at Somers 202, located where else but on Route 202 in Somers. Call Somers 202 at 914-248-8100 and make your reservation today. You can sit in their classy dining room for an elegant dining experience, or just sit in the bar area and watch the game on one of their big flat-screen HD TVs. Somers 202 is a place the whole family is going to love. So go see my buddy Joe Maz and tell him Coach Tony sent you. Stick around, folks. We'll be right back.